Travels of the Ellis Arbor is a TTRPG story set in the world of Bastion using the Vagrant Sun campaign setting. Tune into episode 42, Wodespores. The night still hung heavy in the air as the crew of the Ellis Arbor made their escape. Through the sewers and tunnels they crept, slowly ebbing toward the eastern exit. Night covered their escape as one by one they made for the forests on the outskirts of the city. Under veil of darkness, the clattering sounds of the Danae's Mere Guard had little clue as to where the source of the evening's disturbances went. Surely, the capture of the fleeing rogues of Chester's band would keep them occupied for the crew to find their bearings and map a trajectory. They trekked for around 30 minutes, long enough that the sounds of the hunting sentries were but a distant memory. Finding an alcove of broken branch and soft earth, they made camp for the evening, hoping to recover what time and energy they'd lost. Carpathian's attention turned immediately to preparation of wards, while Edward and Moore prepared some food for their bellies. In turn, Carpathian waved his hands in the air, preparing a number of enchantments. First, a ward that would mask their scent and position from foes. Second, an alarm that would notify the wizard if dangers were close by. Finally, a personal flourish. He wove an etheric dampening effect into the ward. Being safe from dangers was one thing, but it was entirely a different challenge to mask their position from scrying magic. Using the supplies they pilfered from the Dewdowns refinery, Edward and Moore set to work preparing a feast. Not just the mundanity of stale bread and water, but the sweet taste of some confectionery, a gallon or so of milk, and a sizable basket of fruits and vegetables. It was well established that the only member of the crew that could cook was Nout, but that wouldn't stop the pair from ensuring the crew had a healthy meal. Darian removed his jacket, placing his hammer and pistol near a small campfire they'd set, and began working on a rudimentary tent. Sleeves of cloth and leather, combined with the sturdiness of an overturned log, would do nicely to create a tent-like structure. Hoisting an oil lantern above his station, he got to work, preparing as many comforts as the crew could manage. They would have to do without feather pillows and warm blankets for now. All these things and more that a hotel might do better to offer. Having completed his task, Carpathian sidled along the captain, pulling something from his satchel and holding it under the light. "What do you make of this?" Darian turned to look in the wizard's palm. The scattering of roughly cut stones pulled from the remains of the rogue that led the Dewdown sect. As the lantern light touched them, the same crackling electricity that arced from the rogue's body now continued to do so, only in much smaller output.
Ethereum, right? Stones that are made of iodized magic. I recall Nout using them to prepare enchantments upon his tools.
Only it isn't. Ethereum has the distinct property of being reactive to magic. Though, for all the wards that I placed upon this place, they did not react. You saw how lightning was drawn to these stones, yet they barely responded to the casting of my arcana.
Carpathian paused for effect, hoping the captain would understand his meaning. But with a shake of his head, Darian went to continue his tent preparations.
Don't you understand? It's not Ethereum. It's something else entirely.
At this, the captain paused.
But wasn't Nout interested in working with these stones? His ability to work Ethereum is clearly what made him such a beneficial ally to those roguish types.
Carpathian smiled. For a moment, he held on to the fact that he was more knowledgeable than the captain on this matter, until finally he relented.
If I'm not mistaken, this is aetherite. not common in the lands of Bastion, save for the southeastern continent of Obelisk. I hear they have a great many veins of this material, said to be that which forms the land and ferries the soul from body to body. A great many generations are hosted in aetherite.
What does this have to do with Nout?
Again, there was a pause. Carpathian expected more intrigue from the captain. Perhaps the knight had drawn too much of his energies already.
Aetherite has the ability to transmute the soul. It does not have the ability to affect magic. The fact that Nout was able to, or at least played a part in, effective enchantment through these stones. Let's just say it doesn't bode well for the interests of Chester's marvelous band.
So, this Chester's band are using soul crystals to control magic. Seems fairly innocuous. I'm sure that countless have attempted the same. It's no different than what the wizard Aracriel, believing she could control the power of the devil that usurped her.
He didn't say anything, but at the mention of Aracriel, Edward's devil eye quivered.
This is interesting, for certain, but I don't see how it helps much on our journey. Feel free to write yourself some notes. You can share them with Nout when we catch up with him.
Somewhat defeated, Carpathian returned the stones to his satchel.
You think much of yourself if you believe catching up to Nout will be so simple. If he's able to transmute magic through soul, I can see why Chester's band was so interested in him. Perhaps there is yet more to his abilities than we understand.
Darian's attention shifted as the wizard trailed off. He didn't notice that Moore and Edward had fallen strangely quiet. They were always wont to chatter with each other as they worked. Darian had rarely come across a more jovial pair, though as their conversation fell silent, so too did the encampment. Captain, what's going on? Turning to face them, Darian noticed as Edward's face was fixed upon Moore. Moore, who was in the process of preparing some food, stood perfectly still. The vacuous space where his eyes would be, watching closely as something danced upon the air. Soft, yellow spores, dancing gingerly over the campsite. At first, it appeared like embers of their campfire. Were they not swaying to a rhythm that the forest did not offer? Looking upward, more and more of these yellow spores began to drift slowly toward the light of their campfire.
Ed, step back. More, leave your food and step away with him.
But as the captain's command fell on deaf ears, Moore was transfixed. All their senses began to dull as they turned to watching the dancing yellow spores. Ed tried pulling him away, only to be pushed back by a considerable push from the Myconid.
Wodespore. Jungles like this are rank with them. Not all that toxic or problematic. They're said to bring misfortune on the wind. A mere folktale, of course.
With the tap of his staff, Carpathian summoned a soft wind, blowing the spores in a southerly direction. Many danced freely away, adrift in the air some feet from where Moore stood. Though not all of them were so easily dispatched. A small cloud of spores drifted slowly downward and clung to Moore's calloused exterior. As they did, a puff of Moore's own spores began to burst forth, a contrasting crimson to the golden Wodespores. Slowly, more and more began to fasten to the Myconid, causing them to emit more and more of their own in response. A shaken and disturbed Edward spoke out in retort. Carpathian, what are they doing? Is there something wrong?
Even if I knew, Ed, I don't know what I could do to stop it. Myconid are creatures of the Underdark. A curious and unknowable place. Whatever Moore is doing is their business. We best not interfere.
I don't like this. What's happening? More!
The increasingly anxious Edward could only watch as more and more of these yellow spores attached themselves to his myconid companion. The reddish hue of Moore's spore cloud became less saturated. The color shifted through deep, bloody reds, through burning orange, and finally resting on the same soft yellow color. As they shimmered, the color change occurred not just to the spores, but to the myconid's body. Until finally, all at once, the spores began to burst, turning a brilliant white before the color of Moore's stalk turned a pale grey. And once they all burst, all the color of their still myconid companion was drained from them, and they limply fell to one side. Not just still, but motionless and unbreathing. Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Special thanks to new and existing patrons for our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier subscriptions. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure to follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/lonomy. Don't forget, take care of each other.